Good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Now, we have a reasonably ruly group here that wants me to call the meeting to order, correct? So I'm calling the meeting to order, the Shape Committee for March 14th. So roll call.
Chair Smithers.
Here.
Vice Chair Chateau.
Here.
Committee Member Barr.
Here.
Caldwell.
Yes.
Dell.
Late.
Feeney is absent. Knight.
Here.
Neiman.
Here.
Park.
Here.
Salvestron.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Okay, so the item 3 on the agenda, sort of the first order of business. If anybody in the public has anything that they would like to offer up to us that is not on the agenda, something other than what's on the agenda, we'd be more than happy to hear. Sure. You don't have to go up there, no. Unless you want to feel like an alter ego of like be a...
Just a quick question as far as thoroughness of what we're doing with assets and land, it seems now, because we're talking about Adams and we're talking about Lyman. I'm just wondering if the city has a list of other vacant parcels that the city owns.
Mark can answer that, but I'm pretty sure we have all the parcels that are part of the general fund listed here.
There may be some remnant parcels, and I would need to do some work at bringing you back a list if there are some remnant parcels.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. We'll go on to then item 4.1, which is the discussion of City Hall and other city properties. And I think Gene's going to, or Mark are going to explain how we're going to sort of work through this exercise.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to first orient you to a couple of handouts that came today that are in front of you, and then I'll pass it along to Gene. But a couple of documents. This came with your agenda. This is a legal memo. It's a draft from the city's attorneys, and what it does is reference an analysis of the deed restrictions. So we've received title reports for items 1 through 7. The 2 we don't have reports on yet are the Head Start building and the Signorelli barn. And secondly, you have 2 documents. These are, frankly, updates. One is the space analysis. And on page 8 and 9, I want to refer you to an updated analysis of space. What we've done is taken the staff in the current configuration and put together a conceptual list of a police department space requirement and a city hall space requirement. So what these numbers do on page 8 and 9 is they add together. So approximately 3,600 square feet for the police station and about 9,000 square feet for the city hall. And that would be a configuration that reflects the staffing today. I think it's a good order of magnitude. That rolls up to about 12,600 square feet. And we also have updates on the numbers. So they've now used a figure of $527 a square foot. When you do the math on that, that calcs to about $6.6 million. If you used a $600 a square foot figure, which may be more representative of Napa City Hall, that equates to about $7.5 million. So if you're thinking about a brand new City Hall from the ground up, the order of magnitude appears to be 6.6 to 7.5 in today's numbers, with a configuration that looks essentially like that. And I would encourage you to just consider that an order of magnitude.
That's without the police station.
That is with the police station.
With it?
With it. So there's 3,600 square feet that is included in the 12,600 total. So we were previously talking about a number in the range of about 13,000. When EMG ran numbers, they ended up with about 12,600.
Mark, as I just run an eyeball down these space or area numbers, I did not see a number large enough to look like a meeting hall.
There's an 1,180 square foot council chambers that's at the bottom of the page under other.
Ah, okay.
And so could a council chambers be larger than that? Yes. It's just a number that EMG used.
How big is this one?
I don't know the square footage on this room.
Big.
Pretty large.
I guess that it was 1,600, 1,800, something like that. But one of the observations I have had is that this horseshoe, the way it's set up, takes away a lot of space. So you can probably cut that out. And
2 layers.
yeah, so, I mean, if Mark thinks 1,100 is good, we're...
And then secondly, there's a facility condition assessment. And if you open this up on page 2, there's a spreadsheet that I don't think most of us can read. So we printed you a copy of that on 11 by 17 paper. And what this is a replacement cost for City Hall modeled out through, not replacement, but reserves that would be required to maintain and bring City Hall back to better conditions. So the first year that you see here, 2018, in year one, approximately $1 million of investment. A quarter of that is a new roof for City Hall, and then investments over the next several years. And the total of that is $1.6 million, or if you spread that out with an inflator, up to $2.2 million. And so that's a summary of that. And you have one.
That doesn't include, I mean, that's like just repairing and replacing. That wouldn't be doing really any remodeling or, taking out walls and reconfiguring anything.
Right. It is new wiring, new electrical, new plumbing, new roof, no addition. It's basically the same building. And then you also have one additional handout from one of your members tonight who's contributing his ideas that one of the groups will talk about in their group tonight.
We don't have
Oh,
that.
you don't have it yet? Okay, you will have it.
Yeah, you don't want us to look at that until we get into our groups.
Can you not pass that out yet, please? I'll tell you why in just a second. So the process that we agreed on last week was that you would focus in on City Hall. Now remember, that's your primary focus, but the whole idea is whatever your configurations are, you might be leveraging financially with another building or another piece of property. But the focus is what you're going to do with City Hall. We're going to divide into 2 groups. You all picked a number, so those with an even number on this side, those with an odd number on this side, and the odd number group will get Jeff's plan so that it's just like anybody else's. You're looking at somebody else's recommendation, and that becomes part of what that group considers. Okay? And then it'll move forward. That's why I didn't want you to hand them out, because you'd be having a whole nother set in each one of the groups. Okay? So, the idea is that in those groups, you're each going to have some time to present what you think should be done with City Hall or about City Hall. We're going to allow 45 minutes for that and check in with you to see if you need more time. So in that 45 minutes, you need to at least have everybody speak to it. So everybody speaks to it in that 45 minutes. I'm hoping that you're actually going to have some time to start saying, okay, here's the recommendations that we want to put forward, and have some dialogue back and forth about it. But I'll check in with you at 45 minutes. We're really asking that process be done in an hour, if possible, because the next stage is, by the end of that hour, or whatever that time is, each idea is going to be on one of those Post-its. And then, when we come back together, you will present the ideas that you want to move forward to everybody. When you present the ideas, then we have public comment. After the public comment, you all decide, where do we want to go? And part of that's going to be merging things, maybe. Maybe there's similar ideas coming out of the same group. Hopefully, we'll get down to between like 3 and 5 that you say, okay, these are the ones we're going to hold on to for now. Does that make sense? And does that accurately depict what we said last time? Okay. Roseanne and I will be in, each one of us will be in one of the groups. So maybe when you're done with one recommendation, we might be able to put them on a chart for you to save time. But we're here to help you. So if you need us to do something, not like go get your dry cleaning or something, but if you need us to help you with something, and we'll also remind you, because some of you might be getting rolling into ideas, and sometimes if you're a verbal processor, you can not, be unaware that you've taken up 10 minutes. So we'll remind you and say, especially at like 4 minutes, say, that it's been about 4 minutes, you might want to take another minute or two to wrap it up, okay? The other thing is, you're all excited about this. When you did the speed dating thing, you also listened really well to each other. So let's try and do that again, because this is where the rubber meets the road. The invitation for anybody from the public is to walk around these groups, listen in on them. You don't have to sit back here. The microphones will be off so that you can be really talking to each other. This one will also be off. So please visit these groups. You can drag a chair up and sit behind them or just watch them, okay? But it's meant to be something where you can hear the deliberations. You can drag some of the chairs around. I would suggest that the group be on these two tables and those two tables over there so that you can be on this side and be talking to each other easily.
Could we use the table in the back for one of the two groups?
You could if you want to do that.
Which was even and odd? Which odd this side?
Yeah.
Could odd go back there?
Fine with me.
Let's go back there then.
All right.
Let's go.
Odd in the back, even in the front. Odd gets Jeff Feeney's.
You odd?
I'm even, so I'm in the front.
Are you kidding?
What number are you? 6.
And can we turn the then your dialogue with each other. Okay? Does anybody have a preference for starting first? So Tim's going to start off and explain those 5 over there.
And I need to stand whenever I speechify. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to ask my team to chime in if I misstate or miss anything here. We came up with what I think are 5 fundamentally different things to do about City Hall. Most of the attention was centered, at least initially, around leaving City Hall on its current site and building a new one. And it looks very much like what the other team has up there. There was a lot of consensus around facing the front of it towards Lyman Park and coupling that with the rehabilitation of Lyman Park to make the whole site much, much nicer. What to do about the police station was a little bit all over the map. We talked a little bit about the idea of keeping it in the same building, and if the front faced Lyman Park, have it away from Main Street so it's closer to the fire station. There's some energy around police and fire being located, either co-located or close to each other, so it would make sense to put the police over there, or completely decoupling it and maybe attaching it to the police or to the fire station, either build an extra second floor to house it or connect it to it or something of that nature. Parking, a lot of people mentioned the idea of underground parking or attached parking within the building, some sort of covered parking on the backside on the Pine Street side. It would include council chambers. I think that was pretty much a consensus. Funding is an issue because this is, of course, an expensive way to get a new city hall. There was discussion of possibly leasing the CDF Teen Center site if a suitable lessee could be found to do that, to potentially offset some of the substantial costs of building a new city hall. There was also a little bit of a discussion about just moving the police services over to the sheriff department, as some of the other smaller towns in Napa Valley do. All right, team, did I miss anything of importance on that one?
Did you say there was... Did you say there's general consensus on having City Hall house council chambers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would propose not having it house council chambers.
So we're doing the group presentations?
I'm clarifying our presentation.
Oh, okay. All right, because what's going to happen is after we do this, then we're going to have public comment. Then we're all going to get to
It's not my intent to chime in.
I asked my team to chime in if I misstated anything, and I think I misstated that there was a consensus around that item. So thank you, Josh. Let's see, which one do I move to next? This one is a little bit in the same vein, building also a new city hall, but do it somewhere else, either on the CDF Teen Center site or on the Adams Street site. That has the disadvantage of also being a costly option, the same as building it on the City Hall site, but it does free up City Hall for other uses. And we talked a lot about a whole variety of really cool community-oriented uses there, or you could potentially lease it to somebody for some other use. So a lot of different options there. It's also costly. We talked a little bit about how Traffic might be an issue because there are residences straight across from that site. The city hall doesn't seem to generate as much traffic as the police station does. So if you were going to do that, you might want to decouple the police station and maybe put it near the fire station instead of putting it there right next to a lot of residences. Option number 3 would be move it to the library. We realize that is a politically volatile thing to even suggest, but there are some advantages to doing that. The library is a big building. It is plenty big enough to house both the city hall and the police station, and given the size of it, it's potentially big enough to house the city hall and the library. You could maybe leave it there and move City Hall there. It's 17,600 square feet. We just heard tonight that we need about 9,000 for City Hall. If you decoupled the police station, that would leave 8,600 square feet for the library, which is almost double what the American Planning Association recommends for a library of a town this size. So there's a potential option there. We do recognize, though, that that would create a bit of a firestorm in town potentially to suggest doing anything other, something other with that site. Where would you move the library if you didn't keep it at that place? There was some discussion about building a sort of a really nice library facility on Main Street that would be a central attraction in the town. Another option is you could potentially move it to the Carnegie Building, which once was a library. Advantage is it saves, the big advantage for carrying this forward, and again, I want to stress to the public and anybody listening, we are not promoting this as the solution, but it should be in the mix because it is a very cost-effective way to get a much improved city hall for very little money. So it's we would propose that it be carried forward for that reason. The fourth option would be to move it into another existing building besides the library. There have been a number of buildings talked about around town, the Constellation Building, the Catholic School, potentially the West America Bank. These have the advantage is that they could be done relatively quickly. They free up City Hall for all of the other uses that we've talked about, and you could explore leasing or buying those buildings. And those, of course, would require some research to find out if they're even available and what the terms would be to move to those. And then finally, the last one is just to rehab the existing City Hall where it is. We are not proposing that as a really nice solution, but we wanted to keep it in because it makes sense to have a sort of status quo alternative where you, primarily for comparison, what if we just did nothing and we repaired all of the buildings around town? What are the costs there? In order to compare all of the things that we're going to propose in the committee here, we think having that status quo, minimalist sort of solution as one of them in the mix just makes sense for comparison's sake. All right, anything to add, team? Anything I miss? All right, those are our 5, and I'll turn it over to the odd team now.
What they say up there. And we're very much in agreement with your first option. It was keep the City Hall where it is, tear it down, reconfigure the City Hall building itself, and so that it orients toward the park, and so that there's a plaza created in front of it so that people come into it, go through the plaza, and then go into the City Hall via that. There could be a coffee bar there. There could be lots of things that theoretically could bring people up from Main Street with a bag in hand from Model Bakery and have their lunch there. And part of the redevelopment of that site would be to redevelop Lyman Park into something particularly spectacular and beautiful. That becomes the front yard of the city, and we use that for all of our major civic events. And that the good thing about that was that keeps the civic business of the city in one place. That's the emergency services, police, fire, and all the city hall services across the street from the federal civic business, which is the post office. So all of that made some sense that way. We would move the police department, as you suggested, closer to the fire station in case things change with the size and scope of the police department or the professionalization of our fire department these next years. Just thinking in sort of the 40 years that these buildings are supposed to be there, like the last one that we're in now is 60 years. We talked about a 1-story, a 2-story, and a 3-story. We wanted to incorporate this kind of a room, a city council room, so that the staff doesn't have to keep going other places, and have enough square footage so that all the staff can be in one place, basically, for the city services. So that was one, and that was very similar, it seems to me, to what you guys did. Oliver, do you want to just come and talk about yours just for a second? I mean, Oliver is come on up. Why don't you just do yours? It's going to be easier to do it that way, and then Stan had one too. No. Yours is great.
I couldn't wait to go up to City Hall and get a cappuccino. Well, I'm in the minority here, and I'm shaking up some sacred cows here by suggesting that City Hall moves to the library. And I've been kind of like, it's been a big puzzle for 2 years. I've been thinking about this puzzle, and I keep coming back to the same solution. And the reason is because the library really wants to expand itself and become really a full learning center and a cultural center and a community center. And it keeps looking at the vacant land of Adams as being the answer. Part of the 2008 visionary dream was to put another 10,000 feet expansion and put a historical society. And it got loaded up with an amphitheater and on. And there was a smorgasbord of a big utopian plaza in Adams. And then nobody talked about financing it, and then it just all faded away. So here we are going forward, 10 years later, it's like the Twilight Zone, where it's still thinking about maybe loading up Adams Street again with the same vision. And yet, if you really looked at the price tag of what it would cost to build that all out, it's staggering. And not only that, but you shot yourself in the foot because you might need Adams someday as a revenue center. And so what I was trying to figure out is how to get out of this conundrum here, resolving this puzzle, and I realized you got to take Adams off the plate for a lot of reasons. One is you're never going to get anywhere if you start to tie in Adams to the big picture, because you might get so much resistance you can't even get City Hall figured out. So I was imagining, how do you resolve this riddle by leaving Adams out and leaving it for the future? I have another idea for Adams, but I'll come back to that, and that is leave it off the table and figure out what can you do with what resources you have. So let's say you have the library, which is in a dead-end zone, surrounded, has nothing to relate to it. In fact, at Adams, you're not even allowed to eat and drink there. They have signs everywhere, and there's no outside really to go. There's no park to enjoy. And so it's kind of I can't talk when you're talking.
No, I think we should. Adams Street's going to be. There's a lot of Adams Street talk going on, and I think we're going to grapple with Adams Street.
Well, I know, but this is all a pretext to where I'm going. Why I think going to the library is a good idea. Let me just finish, Mark. Okay, so the situation is we don't have unlimited money, and if you had a choice between putting the money into a cultural center or a civic or city hall, what would you choose? If you had a simple answer for City Hall, by which it would just simply go into the library, and now the library would go into a big, beautiful complex built at Lyman Park, where it's all tied together as one-stop learning cultural center. It would then make the park useful. It's an acre of valuable land that is just a total dead end because it has no relationship with City Hall and the police department. In fact, on the weekends, they're closed. And Lyman Park is just kind of not there. Hardly anybody goes to it. And so to repeat the process by building a new city hall in the same spot is just a continuum of the function, which is nothing. Lyman Park will never become important. The irony is that Lyman Park originally was the first community center of St. Helena. The Turner Hall was on the front of the Lyman property. And that was the hall that provided all the musicals and the plays. It was a saloon. It was the first high school of St. Helena. It was a very important place. In fact, that's where all the high school parades start. And because of World War I and everybody was against the Germans, it went into disrepair and became a park. But as far as the heart, Lyman Park was always the original community center of St. Helena. And so the beauty about moving City Hall there is that if you shore up more functions with life, entertainment, dance, theater, plays, Tai Chi Park, things like that, then the end of Main Street has an anchor point, and then which helps shore up all of Main Street, because Main Street is going sideways. I don't know if you've been looking around lately, but it's starting to become more dilapidated, more empty. It needs to be reinvigorated. And how do you do that? I mean, it's a real problem right now, how to fill those shops. I mean, Amazon has just hollowed out all retail. So if you put a cultural center with a lot of activity and these people are walking to the center to go see a big exhibition, maybe for the German winemakers at the center, or they're going to a TED Talk, or there's the music is going in the park, but the park's redone. Now you can do the music inside the big exhibition halls, even when it rains. Then suddenly that becomes the anchor tenant, which then revitalizes all of Main Street, because all of Main Street really is our image. When people come to town and they start to see this town looking more like Modesto and Turlock and Merced, that's not good for our property values. That's not good for our image. So I think all of Main Street needs to be shored up by a cultural center at Lyman Park. City Hall, there's no great interest in putting $10 million into a City Hall. I mean, there's no wow factor. I think when we asked the people at Cosmod, I said, is there a wow meter for City Hall? And they said, it's always packaged with something else, because the public can't wait to spend money on on offices. It's basically offices. Offices don't belong on Main Street. And the beauty about Lyman Park is it's the center point of the town. People can walk to it. They go downtown, they eat at Model Bakery, then they walk up and see an exhibition down at Lyman Park. To build Adams Street is a big monster. No matter how you cut it, once you start to... Yeah. Okay. Well, the reason is because I have to take it off the table to show why this solution... I'm sorry? It's off. It's off the table. Okay. What does that mean? I'm sorry. What does that mean, off the table? Okay. So anyway, that was the argument for moving it to the library. So, sorry. Thanks for that time.
But we got to shorten these up to the idea and not all of the background to it, so that you can then talk about all of those other pieces, okay?
Thank you. I'm Stan Knight. My concept was the existing state, there is the City Hall administrative area that's co-joined with a taller police department building at the back. What I see are two buildings that are joined together, and my thought was to tear down the City Hall front portion of the property and then rebuild in that same footprint a very beautiful, nicely architected City Hall building that would be visually beautiful from Main Street, that could also be very integrated into Lyman Park. So the entrance could be facing Lyman Park. Lyman Park would be a big part of that redesign, with some re-terracing, a fountain toward the street. But that corner of Pine and Main would be beautified with a new building in the current City Hall footprint, but it would be multi-story, perhaps 2.5 stories in a classic Napa Valley farm-style architecture with a veranda on two sides, etc. The police department would stay where it is, but be sectioned off as a separate structure and renovated for continued use by the police. And it would be it's oriented more toward the fire station. It already is, but part of the reason for my thinking on this is cost effectiveness. I think that I've done a lot of facilities and building renovations and moves, and I think by trying to repurpose the police department footprint, for example, and keeping that function there adjacent to the fire department, but then only tearing down and rebuilding in the footprint of the front section of the building, but much more effectively utilizing and tying into Lyman Park and beautifying Lyman Park, I think it presents a lot of cost-effective benefits. I'd probably leave it at that. Did I leave anything out? Thanks.
The fourth option we had was tear down. I can't quite find it up there, but it was basically tear down City Hall, sell the property, and then move City Hall to either an existing building or move it to Adam Street, I think is what Jeff was saying. So a little bit of a variation on the theme of just about everything out there. Okay.
That's pretty much our group of ideas. One thing that we talked about as a group that I think would be useful to all of us together is that we define the terms community center and cultural center, so that we're not confusing them. And I know we're going to run into that again when we talk about the Carnegie Building. So if we can just agree to call a community center a place very much like what the Carnegie Hall is used now for, which is yoga classes to weddings to wakes, more like Native Sons, that kind of community activity, where a cultural center would be a place that we'd hope to attract dance and music and art and TED Talks and intellectual stimulation for our little young people, our old people, everybody. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a cultural center. When we're talking about a community center, it's much more like the Carnegie Building.
Yeah, we can open it up for public comment at this point. If anybody wants to go up and, make public comment. And
my name is Ann Carr, his wife. First of all, I want to congratulate all of you. If I were on the committee, I think I'd be up for fisticuffs, and I think it's really good the way you can listen to each other and not be screaming and yelling. Nice going. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the idea of a cultural center, and I guess I would ask you, Oliver, whether you've been to the high school and been to any of the performances at the new Performing Arts Center that we have there, which is fabulous, state of the art. There's a little theater, there's a drama room, there's a band room for rehearsals, and I would consider a partnership with the school district with that wonderful facility. I don't think that you would get buy-in from the community for another facility as a cultural center. That took a long time to get, and it's fabulous. So, as far as the library is concerned, to a lot of us, I think it's the crown jewel of the community. And to say that nothing is going on there, there are children's classes. If you go in there, the place is just vibrant. All kinds of things going on for kids. There's people in there using the computers. It's beautiful. There's the wine library. What else did I want to say? Oh, I think the idea of moving City Hall to an existing building. Mark Prestwich just told me that the Catholic school may be available, that they will be closing next year. To me, that's a really viable situation, leaving the existing area open for something else. So I think that was it. Yep. And thank you for doing the really good work that you're doing. Super important.
Thanks for your input. Yeah. Anybody else okay?
Hello, I'm Esther Ackersloot. I've seen you guys a number of times, and you do great work, and thank you so much for all your help. Anyway, I rather like the idea of a city hall with a rather impressive facade. Doug brought out a program of having combined with Lyman Park with a beautiful frontage and so on. City Hall needs to be impressive, in my opinion. That's where, that's our life of our city in the civic area there. And it needs to say something about our town. It needs to look good. Anyway, also, as far as the performing arts building at the high school, that's a beautiful building. You ought to go check it out. And that's already been built. And it's beautiful. They do a lot, as Anne explained, what all the facilities are there. It's really great. And there would be more parking there, too, along the street, too. One other thought. Oh, I just don't want you guys to forget the bowling alley. I want a bowling alley. So please, somewhere, try to stick that in, okay? Thank you for listening. Bye.
Do you know what? Do the old lanes still exist? Does the wood from the old lane still exist with somebody? Didn't
I have no idea.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
I've heard a rumor that they're still. I've heard a rumor they're still around somewhere. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you could make good use of that and save some money.
Historically.
Skating rink, too. We need to have that, Esther.
A skating rink would be also nice, yeah. But I wouldn't be able to do that, but I would be able to bowl.
Thank you.
I'm Elaine DeMann, and I want to thank all of you for what I know is exhausting work, because I've been trying to keep up with you, and it's pretty difficult. I have gone all over the place with, what I thought should happen with City Hall, from, just fix it, to getting very, very inspired by some of the things that I heard. Doug had the advantage of having a visual and his very animated self to really get me as a resident excited about the idea of a civic center that we can all be proud of and want to spend time at. Oh God, that's bad sentence structure. But I don't think it's fair to say that Lyman Park is dead. If it is, I think it can be resurrected, and it could be resurrected with the kind of building and facilities that Doug mentioned, which did include some places for the public to come in, and both residents and visitors. The historical Society having an exhibit there, rotating or permanent. A coffee shop, how wonderful would that be? I also disagree that an office that is just an office, you just go there and do office work. I think that we should give our city's employees a beautiful place to come to work. One that reflects our generosity as a community, and one that will encourage and inspire very well qualified people to want to come and work in St. Helena. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have time
So
for me to...
I guess, yeah, I think at this point in time we were going to sort of open it up to any and all comments that anybody wants to throw out there.
I'd just like to comment on Anne's comment. The Performing Arts Building is really terrific, and we had a little committee that was working on the concept of cultural things about a year and a half ago, about cultural events here. How could we make this like the Aspen Institute? And when we get to Adams Street, I'll eventually talk about that, and Aspen Think Tank, and the Ideas Festival, and the Camden pop tech festival. We're in a position to be able to do that here better than probably any other small town. And it would start, theoretically, at the Performing Arts, because you don't want to build a building before they come to start this out. And that's where it would start. It's about a 350-seat hall that can turn into 390 seats. And it's a great place to start it, whether it's where Oliver wants to build it or where I want to build it. Wherever that ends up, it's going to start someplace else first, I think, and that would be the ideal place for it. So we're in a good position to use that.
I wanted to comment also on Elaine's comment about City Hall should be a wonderful place for beautiful and functional for employees. And, we spent the better part of 2 meetings, plus homework, plus outside meetings talking about criteria or values. And that indeed was one of the things that came out over and over again, is that we want a City Hall workspace that attracts good employees and keeps them. And so I appreciate your bringing that up, because it goes along with the process that we've been asked to do here, which partly is to establish criteria and use those criteria when we make decisions about our assets. And I got to tell you that every time I talk to or hear Oliver, he convinces me a little bit about his theory, but I'm not sure he's ever going to convince me fully. But one thing that worries me about it is that there's no parking around there. And I know Mark thinks we should all ride our bicycle, but I'm too old to ride a bicycle. And
you could take the St. Helena Vine shuttle. They'll pick you right up at your door.
Well, it might not be all that convenient, especially if the event I want to go to is at night. It doesn't run at night. But I think that is a real negative for having either a performing arts center. If you're talking about a cultural center like a museum where you walk in and look at exhibits, that wouldn't be a problem. But if you're looking at an event center where you have performing arts things going on, that would really be a problem. I didn't know that the school was open to negotiation about the public using their performing arts center. It's an interesting concept, Elaine. I'm sorry. I don't. You don't know for sure?
No.
I know the city and the school district were partners on the swimming pool for a long time.
It's on a calendar, and if they have time for us, for anybody outside of anybody reasonable outside of what the school's using it for, they would love to be able to lease it.
And there would be a large fee for using it.
It's a fee, but it's not astronomical. And theoretically, any of the cultural stuff this is the epitome of public-private partnerships. You have to find sponsors to help you pay for the people that are going to come here and put them up and deal with it. It's a real challenge and a real chore. But if it builds into something, it's a reason besides wine to come to Napa Valley, and then they stay for 2 or 3, 4 days. In Aspen, they stay for 2 months, all of July and August for these things, and they've done it for 50 years. So it's a reason to do performance without selling wine. The wine is the bonus you get for showing up to go to that performance. And so you get a different kind of tourism, but much more importantly for us, it'll help every little kid and every senior and everybody in this town, because in Aspen they go for free for the rehearsals, for the shows, and they get to see artists working and rehearsing and becoming artists and being directed by professionals. And it's an amazing opportunity that we should at least explore, it seems to me.
If the city owns it, it's very likely it'll have to be financed or a public-private partnership. But ultimately, the city will outright own it.
That's right.
And then it's going to be nothing but a source of revenue.
That's correct.
So,
That's correct.
so some of the folks that are talking about this cultural center thing, I guess what I want to understand a little bit is, so are we saying that the Performing Arts Center here at the high school is inadequate, or it's in the wrong place, or we need two of them, or what are we saying?
My thinking on it is that if we use and I know this is off topic tonight, but if we were to use the Aspen Institute and the Aspen Music Festival and school, because it's actually a teaching academy for young people from all over the country come there to watch philharmonic orchestras and chamber singers and opera singers and ballet people teach one another how to do things. And you go to these performances and if you see a ballerina practicing right there that close to you and you're a 6-year-old, believe me, you want to be a ballerina. It's that kind of a situation.
No, I know. I guess what I'm trying to understand is this art, especially in the summertime, I mean, school's out. So is this cultural center not adequate?
It's not that it's not adequate. It's where I think we would start, because this is the kind of thing that you have to get people to sponsor this. You have to have people working hard and then eventually become professionalized. The budget for Aspen is $114 million. It generated $127 million this year. So it's not small potatoes. But it took them 75 years to get there. And they started in a tent.
But I know, but is the building or the auditorium or the center, is it too small?
It's not to start. And then we'd have to see where it grows. But you'd want to think in terms of, if we could pull this off, where would we want to put it? And you have to think in terms of, if you're trying to get the San Francisco Symphony to come up here for 3 weeks in which they have student orchestras, they have their own orchestras, they have chamber music, and they have a slate of programming, how do you entice them?
So you're saying you could start with this for several years?
For a few years anyway, and see if the ball's going to roll, and then you see where you go from there.
Maybe it would pay for itself.
Well, it's always going to be, you'll have to find sponsors to help pay for it. And once you get to we're going to build a place for this, then you're going to have to get somebody to build the building for you, and then it'll be on city property. So the city gives the land, somebody comes in and builds on that land,
yeah,
and then it becomes the city's.
Because one of the things I'm being careful with is, the citizens of town, I mean, they've paid for this cultural center, and then do they want to pay for another one? And so maybe if it's something we grow into, I get
it's something
that.
we grow into, and that's all I'm suggesting. Because it's not an easy thing to pull off, although we are ridiculously ripe for it, and the right audience for it. Everything is right for it, but it means that we're going to have to work as a community to buy in and then put together people and then get out and make it happen. And that's probably minimally 5 years away.
On a more mundane topic, I'd like to go back to City Hall.
No.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
My idea was a 2-story City Hall building with the police department downstairs, the back of the building facing Pine Street, and it was my idea to have half of the downstairs, the backside toward Pine Street, be parking for police cars and city employees, having the advantage of when the police brought in someone they had apprehended, they could just take them out of the car, go through a door, and take them straight into the police department. But, as we have this conversation, I could be convinced to move the police department over closer to the, I think, Mark, you talked about this first time that we had a small group, over closer to the fire department. If somebody could convince me that it's not a good idea to utilize space by putting 2 stories on it. And then I know Joshua, who's not here right now, and somebody else were very much in favor of underground parking. But I think if we're going to look at that, we have to look at the cost of underground parking compared to a kind of idea like I suggested. And it just makes sense to me, because land is so valuable, to build 2 stories and put everything we can into those 2 stories.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with multi-story City Hall, or even if there's something else on the ground floor or it's up. I mean, I think certainly multi-story and maximizing the use of the land, the property, the footprint makes all the sense in the world. It also frees up for parking and other things as well. Yeah. I wouldn't mind hearing, because I know you were pretty enthusiastic about your cultural thing. How does this cultural center fit into your concept?
Which cultural
No, I'm
center?
talking about Oliver.
Oh, you're looking at me?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I want to make sure that we get to, because the point is to try and get to 5, no more than 5 tonight, that you're going to carry forward. So
Okay.
we want to make sure there's a lot of overlap,
Yeah.
but I really want to make sure. So
And the cultural center thing is part of
Right.
one of the main concepts. So I think we have to flesh it out a little bit more, and I do want to understand a little bit more because I do think it's important. There are some of the things people wanted. They wanted gathering places and cultural and recreational opportunities. I mean, so it is something people are requesting.
Okay, so if I can just answer a couple questions. First of all, what's fantastic when you go to the Fine Arts Museum, the De Young in Golden Gate Park, it's so incredible. You go underground, you park, and you go up an elevator, and you're in the museum. And this is what I can imagine at the City Hall site, is going underground, park your car, and you go in an elevator, and you're in the library, or you're in the new exhibition center, or you're going to throw some clay pots, or you're going to go and listen to a little bit of chamber music, or you're going to go and play a little bit of ping pong, or you're going to meet somebody for a cappuccino, or you're going to go on the rooftop park and have a glass of wine and look at the sunset. So I think parking is an easy solution because underground parking is so much cheaper than land. And none of that, but railroad is only 90-second walk down the street that could be great for over parking for bigger events. And so I'm with you. I mean, I don't want to walk a long way, but I love going to the De Young Museum. You just park and you go right up an elevator and you're right there in the middle of beautiful culture, seeing great exhibitions. Two is, Ms. Carr, I don't want to elicit fears about the library. I see the whole cultural center is really an extension of the library. I see it all as one big complex where people go to transcend. The definition of a library I once read was that place that's other than your work or where your home is. It's that place where you go to escape, to learn, to expand your mind, to enlighten yourself. The problem with the library building is, even though it's a beautiful building, we have a nostalgic, emotional connection with the building, its function and facilities is very limited. I go to events, I see these multimedia presentations on Klimt and Degas, and I'm looking over a sea of heads. The seating's bad, the screen is pulled down, it's not the greatest BA. I always sit there and I think there could be a much greater experience in a new building with a better multimedia rooms where people could go in and see a big permanent screen with great PA experience, and they could have a much more enriched engagement with the lecture, with the whole concept. So and as far as the performance center, I'm very tuned into it. All my son's friends are all in the play Fiddler on the Roof this Friday night. I got my ticket. I'm going. That's a great place to go, but it's a theater style seating. It's got one rigid function, and that is a performance art. I'm talking about a complex of beautiful two-story barns built around the Lyman Park, by which one could be a big exhibition hall for multiple uses where, let's say we want to have a big auction dinner party for the Rionda House. Now we just go across the street and we have a big, beautiful ballroom overlooking the park that's all lit up at night, and then we generate $400,000 in revenue from a big, exquisite dinner. We bring in a big dance band. We have a lot of places to dance. Can't dance at the performance art, and we can serve wine, which you can't serve on the school campus. So I see this as an extension of the library, and no way do I want to threaten the library. I mean, the library is so important. When we moved here with our kids, we were there all the time in the library. So please don't misunderstand me about that. And two, as far as the cultural center, community center, whatever it is, it's a place where there's life and there's enjoyment and there's learning, and that's what's going to bring that park together. You put a city hall next to the park, it's going to be the same dissonance. There's going to be no relationship between the two concepts.
Anybody else want to dive in or?
On the cultural center, or just in cultural center, or just in general?
No. Just in general on what was presented by the groups.
Well, my impression is that we have actually pretty good agreement between the two groups. With the exception of the minimalist rehab over there, I think though 4 on the left from the even group are all represented in the odd group over there, so I think we have essentially 4 or 5 if we keep the status quo in there.
We take offense to being called the odd group. But, I mean, so let me ask you something. I understand how you got to this rehab one, but is it really something that you guys are promoting?
No, not at all. I'm responsible for that one. Nobody else brought that up. I put it in there.
There's the detailed guy again, right? Well, wait, we could.
I
from
put
a
it
cost
in
standpoint, we can save a lot of money.
Because anytime you're looking at alternatives, I think it makes sense to have a sort of do nothing in there, more for comparison's sake than the fact that you're going to do it. So
But you're not promoting it.
I'm not promoting it at all. And in fact, the build anew on the CDF teen site, most of the group said, bunch that up and throw it away. We don't even want to show it. But because we had already written it, we put it up there. But nobody on the group was really pushing that to go up there.
So then it sounds like we really maybe have 4-ish.
The Band-Aid that is do nothing except minimum maintenance is $900. It's a $900,000 Band-Aid according.
No, actually, it's more if you look at the new EMG report.
Oh, there you go. So
it's a minimum of 1.6, and with some inflation, it's $2 million.
Well, there you go.
And that's actually not improving anything and remodeling anything.
That means tearing it down in 5 to 10 years anyway. So yeah,
if you want to retain any talent, you're probably talking about $3 million.
Yeah. And then you might as well just go ahead and build a building that's going to last for 40 years.
And it's an easy option to carry along because we've got the costs basically already done, and it doesn't change anything.
Unless the town gets together and says, we want to do that. then you'll open a
we're here to reflect the will of the town. So
But we don't have to
And that's when we quietly just don't listen.
I don't know if we can get away with that either.
Do we have to have 5 if we...
No, we can have 3 or 4, we can have 2, we can have 1.
It seems to me that we have a lot of consensus on.
I think so.
Build in place, 2-3 stories, incorporate the park, make the parks.
Yeah.
That's both groups. That's completely both groups. The only thing we agree that there needs to be a cultural center. I think that much. We don't agree quite where it should be. So there's a second.
That's an alternative for the City Hall property. Is have a cultural center.
So that's a good alternative.
Move it to the library. I mean, that's one of, I think, the ones we end up with that are going to carry forward to some other future discussion.
Right, and it seems like part of those first ones all look towards the teen center property to lease it or sell it or somehow finance it if possible.
Yeah, so then, I mean...
So that fits in with kind of all of the others.
Right.
We should try to come to some consensus on whether to have the police department in that 2-story building or move it over closer to the fire department.
The suggestion I would make on that is just say the police station is still on the property of City Hall, and then later you can flesh out whether it's a separate building attached to the. I mean, that may be even something that we just don't get into the weeds so much, and that's City Council is going to have to decide if they want to maybe separate it. At the end of the day, City Council is going to have to look at all this stuff anyway.
It seems to me, Pat, and we had discussed this a bit, that separating it is a practical option, but it's based upon information we don't have, because we're looking at a 40-year plan, and we don't know what the police department's going to look like over a long period of time, or the fire department as well in terms of
the question, though,
so
is
the
then
City Council will
what do
have
you do
that.
with 2 stories?
I think
I think City Hall can be 2 stories.
Oh, 2 stories.
Sure.
Just to fill,
and maybe 3 with some professional offices or something on top of it. I mean, that's...
So you're talking taking up less footprint but higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about some of the buildings that are there, I mean, you got the Y down, down the street a little bit is 3 stories, and the post office is 2.5. And a 3-story building, whether it's 3 or 2, we're saying multi-story, and not, maybe that's the further discussion when we rally around a final proposal.
Can I check a couple of things out? Are you saying that the rehab existing can come down? That's not going to be something that moves forward? Yeah?
Yes.
So let's do that.
Tim, would you like the honors of tearing it off the wall?
I can just carry it forward by myself.
And then are you also saying that the build new on the CDF teen is another one that comes down?
Yes, take it down.
Sounds like it.
Okay. Now, There is a lot of overlap with those 3 there and the 5 that are up here. The one difference, and you could still hold on to it, is that there's no mention of selling City Hall property, but there is there. Do you want to leave that as an option underneath some of these, or do you want to have a separate one that says, we move City Hall and we sell the existing City Hall partial? Because it's on 2 or 3, at least 2 of those.
There's been a lot of discussion about it. We have to keep it.
I think you have to look at the idea of selling or ground leasing City Hall. Yeah, I mean, you can use it as a financing mechanism in one form or the other if you sell it or if you lease it. So I think that has to be an option to, if you've moved City Hall completely away from the property and moved it somewhere else.
Although we might want to eventually revisit it when we have more time and talk about what the options might be, because if there's no real option for that property because of the shape, size, fire station right next to it, then we may be shooting ourselves in the foot by having a pipe dream of we could
I guess
sell that for a lot of money.
We'll have a chance to talk to Cosmont about that, but I mean, if we've got appraisers telling us the thing's worth $4-point-something million.
Well, that was maybe partially based upon the fact that a hotel company offered that for it so that they could then build a big Four Seasons type hotel.
If you look at the appraisals, they were looking at comps and stuff, so it really had nothing to do with the previous hotel offer. Yeah. I mean,
And the HRV bid on that was, those guys said they would do that standalone, so we have one hotelier who said they would put a hotel on that site, and they were not concerned with the fire station. So, I mean, there are options to be explored on leasing it to someone.
And I don't know that we would, I think we wouldn't say, lease it to a hotelier or lease it to an office building or lease it to a retailer. We would just say, sell or lease the property. And then it would have to go where it goes after that,
Right, I'm not pushing the hotel idea, but I think it's the question of whether it's a viable property to somebody is unanswered.
Can I just talk?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I'm hoping that we don't sell that property. I just don't think that's an option that we should put on there, selling it.
Well, I think it's an alternative.
Well, yes, I guess it is. Leasing it would be much more to my
Why?
hope
Just out of
than
curiosity.
selling it because I have a thing about us selling our assets.
But what if selling it helps you better finance the other 10 things you want to do?
I don't know. That's just my personal feeling.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that we should sell it.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry.
Can I just make a comment about hotels making offers to buy City Hall? I don't have all the facts, but I think the offers that we got were really contingent on getting the big prize of Adams. They weren't really standalone offers. They were just thrown into the mix. And I think we confused ourselves as to thinking that, oh my God, somebody's going to give us $5 million for this. I don't think that's the reality here. And I think if you put an RFP out solely for that property, you might find out the real reality. The downside about selling City Hall is there's no setback requirements on commercial property, which would just kill the park. They could build right up to the lot line, and the lot line does not run perpendicular to Main Street. It runs at a hard angle, which means Lyman Park would be kind of like skewed off of Main Street with a huge, maybe 3-story structure there. And I agree with Suzanne about selling our asset, but I would sell an asset if it brought money back in perpetuity, like TOT, but that's not a place where I can imagine a hotel in any shape or form. For another reason, that is, a hotel there would be an average 3-star hotel. You couldn't put a great property there. We don't need another 3-star hotel in this town. We have plenty of this, and
if I can cut you off, I want to, because I do think we probably.
Well, no, I just want to. I want to support.
But the alternative that's being put up is not move City Hall or buy a piece of buy another existing building and sell City Hall to a hotelier. That's not it. The concept is, buy another piece of property or lease another piece of property that already exists, put City Hall there, and sell or lease the City Hall property. And, I mean, it's an alternative. It's just one of 4 we're going to have. I mean, I could wax all day about how I don't think a cultural center goes on that property. I'm not going to shoot down the alternative. I'm going to say, no, let's leave the alternative out there so we can all discuss it. And the public can hear about it.
I want to endorse what Mark is saying. I, at this point, would be an absolute no vote on selling that property if I had a vote. But I think it's imperative to keep that as an option. I mean, we are going to talk about 11 other pieces of property, and as we develop other ideas, maybe this will come back into play. But right now, I think it needs to be on the table, although, as I said, I don't see that it would ever fly, but I think we should keep it on.
I will change that to an option, but I can guarantee you if it comes to a vote, my vote will be no to sell it.
So let me check something out just in terms of process, right? Because you're going to keep doing this, but we want to try and get a manageable grouping that will carry forward to your final or your next level of deliberations. You've already said these 3 over here you want to hold. Let's look at those and make sure that they're either covered there or we add them. So the first one is rebuilding City Hall on Adams Street, sell or lease existing property. Does that stay as an option, or are you saying, no, we want to forget Adams Street? That's really the issue there on that.
I think we have to include that one.
I mean, it's an option, and we're probably going to have 4 or 5.
Okay.
I mean, it's an option. It's something to still leave on the table. And we'll be getting public input. You're going to be doing focus groups. We're going to get to the end after looking at all the buildings, and, there may be more discussion amongst committee members and committee with public. I mean, I don't think we say, we would never even consider putting City Hall on Adams Street. I mean, I think we would consider it.
So, okay.
I mean, the library is effectively considering putting, if you move City Hall to the library, it's effectively saying move it to Adams Street. I mean, it's the same thing, I mean, at some level.
I think if you put that one over here, you got it.
So can you move it over? And then I just want to make sure that we're clear about what you're holding on to and what, if anything, you're letting go of. That's it, because you're not going to make a decision tonight. You're just trying to whittle down so that you can get the information you need on financing from Cosmont, and you can do that other piece.
I think those other 4 are covered.
Are those other 4 all covered?
Well, I think that the next one there, which is Oliver's, is sort of covered with our much more vague wording that you can use the City Hall site for multiple other uses.
Yeah, can I try and I think I can maybe take care of 2 here at one time. This one that says rebuild City Hall on Adams Street and sell or lease the existing property. I mean, that can be rebuild City Hall somewhere or buy an existing building. I mean, it's basically like move City Hall off the property, and we're not. I mean, it could be various things. And I think it maybe covers. This one here says purchase existing building and sell or lease. I mean, I think that's really kind of one concept.
So is that different than the one that starts the second one in, move it to the library, build new one on Main Street, or put in Carnegie Hall or keep library? Then you can use the City Hall site for multiple uses, community-oriented or whatever. Is that the same thing or different?
No, I think that one, move it to the library, build, and then I think they're saying build a new library, right?
Yeah, that was
Which I think that goes more with the one that Oliver was proposing, which was tear down City Hall, build a cultural center, move it to the library. I think those 2 they're basically the same thing.
Okay.
I think.
Yes.
And I think the purchase existing building is the left one up there for ours, which is move it to another existing building, and it's either lease or buy. So that one is covered by the left-hand one over there.
Is that lease or buy where you're moving it to, or
lease or buy where you're moving it
okay.
to? Yeah.
And could you put underneath there and possibly sell the City Hall property? And
well, we were super vague about that. We just said freeze it up for other uses, which is lease, sell, or cultural center, or whatever you want to do on it.
Is that one the same one as leave where it is and build new two-story
Yes.
with Lyman Park and
More or less.
and then the tear down and rebuild City Hall?
Sounds the same to me.
Well,
Is that
this
the same?
one's a little different. This is Stan's, and Stan's was a little bit of a twist on. It's a little bit of a twist on. He's not tearing the whole building down. He's only tearing the front part of it down, and he's trying to renovate the police and I guess the old fire bays, which are considered. I think he's thinking are part of the police station, but they're not. So I don't know. It's somewhat similar. It's a slight nuance on build a new one. I don't know if Stan wants to keep it as a fifth option or maybe have it just fit as, you
fine.
get into it, you look at it and think conceptually about how much you tear down.
I'd like to keep it as a separate option. I might cross out that fourth line. I'm not sure. I think that caused some confusion there. Yeah. Yeah. But
So
that
that would be the fifth.
yes, yeah. And that concept is more of a. It's not minimalist, but it's a
It's a partial tear down.
partial tear down and a cost-effective. Or
Could you write that on there to make it clear? Partial tear down?
well, yeah. It's
Because I didn't understand that.
yeah. I'm considering City Hall to be the front part, the police to be the back part.
Right, so it's a separating.
Okay, so those are the 5. We'll type these up for you and get them out to you so that they'll be part of your packet moving forward. So next question, what do you want to take next week? You did the biggie. Which buildings do you want to focus on or properties?
The teen center and CDC, CDF, whatever.
Yeah,
that-
that's what I was going to suggest. Too,
That's because
the
that's
railroad-
related to financing for City Hall, but it seems like we can probably get past that too, because I think there's going to be some universal agreement to try and see what happens, and then maybe come up with some alternatives if the trained people aren't interested, basically.
But I think that's going to be pretty easy.
Yeah, I think we should have a
And
second
I think we
thing
should
to hit,
do
too.
a more
That's gonna
difficult
go pretty
one,
fast, I think.
like the courtyard with it.
Yeah, and that's a hard one. That's a good one, yeah.
And what about throwing the library in there? Because I think the library will be fairly easy aside from what we've already talked about.
I thought you were.
You want to do 3?
Yeah,
Well,
let's do 3.
Here's what
I think
we
the
should. Let's list all 3, and we may only get through 2.
There you go.
Okay.
I'd be in favor of covering the Railroad Avenue properties, the teen center, the CDF building,
Well, I
and
think
the
that's
Boy
what we just
Scout
said.
building.
Yeah.
That's what we just said.
Yeah, I was just
No, he said the
endorsing.
Boy Scout building.
Oh,
Well, Boy Scout. If there was time to talk about the Boy Scout,
I don't know.
I think
the
Boy
Railroad
Scouts is
Avenue-
going to be a little bit
It's-
complicated, and I
it's-
think the courtyard is going to be a
yeah.
little bit complicated, too.
plus it's got its deed restrictions / wishes of the person that donated it. I'd like to stay with the CDF, Teen Center, Courtyard, and then possibly we get to the library.
I have a request, though, if we're going to talk about the courtyard. I have a request that the city manager give us some more information regarding a road that he mentioned to me. And I think the Department of Public Works head needs to give us some information before next week, or else we can't talk about it.
And in conjunction with that, I think the idea is that road repair, which would cost more, or are they about the same, to repair that road if that property is usable over by the water and sewage, and what's the cost of infill to make the current corporate yard above water all the time?
The problem is, even if you make it above water,
I know.
you got to get stuff out of there when it's flooding.
I agree.
You'd have to build the whole road up.
I'm with you.
In terms of the current site, there probably are some challenges with adding fill there, because what it would do is contribute new runoff to some other properties.
Yeah, and the creeks as well. I know Fish and Game, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare.
And the road that Pat is referring to is Jack's Lane, I believe, and it's a single basically a single lane, a very narrow lane that takes you out to the wastewater facility. And we've done some research, and I have some additional material that I can share on that.
Yeah, but before we meet next week.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a little more work. There's some Environmental Quality Act considerations as well, and planning issues that are part of that consideration.
And I think we need a flood map of the wastewater facility.
And I have
some
that
of the
now.
historical information with regards to flooding there.
Maybe
Right.
we ought to gather up the easy ones, the low-hanging fruit, the fire station and the library, because we know we know how much it's going to cost to fix them, and we're not going to tear them down and start from scratch. Add that together with the CDF.
I mean, the courtyard is,
Teen
it's a little bit complex, and I know people have talked about moving it to the wastewater, but there are some issues that I think maybe we need to gather that information
No,
together.
that's
and-
why I'm saying maybe postpone
Yeah.
that one for we can pick up two easier ones to go with the CDC and the teen center, the library and the fire station, for
Yeah.
instance, that are just.
So library,
But
fire
can we
station.
clarify what we're doing so that we can start working on it?
Teen Center,
Doug is saying one
CDF.
thing, Mark's saying another.
Right. So you guys got to decide. You've definitely said Teen Center and CDF.
Right.
What's your third and or fourth?
Second, third, you mean? Those are one property.
Okay.
So.
Worst comes to worst, we have a short meeting. So, so we could do teen center, CDF.
complicated, too.
No,
it may
Library, fire station are really
library and fire station.
it's so easy.
Let's.
It's going to be a short meeting.
I mean, because even here we are. I mean, it's 9 o'clock. Wouldn't be a crime if we got out here at 8 o'clock one night, because we don't seem to be able to do 8:30.
Sound
Okay.
good? Sounds good. Everybody agree? Okay. Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but they're
I guess I'm supposed to say meeting adjourned.